This is taper week, so just, do whatever you would do normal, but like 20% less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that really true?
Yeah. I mean,
Are you,
if you're training for like, yeah, whatever race it is. I don't know like 5Ks per se, but like on marathons and half marathons, like usually the last 2 weeks, you just not as much effort because you just don't want to get hurt. You want to rest good. So,
okay.
but I always felt like I was like unpreparing. Like I'd worked really hard up until that point, and then I was kind of like eating more and doing less. I'm like, how is this supposed to make me, kind of peak?
I would try to do a harder run on Tuesday or Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Then easy on Friday, nothing on Saturday. Because I don't run that hard anyway.
Yeah.
To even suggest that I'm training is an insult to trainers everywhere.
Yeah, my buddies are all injured. So like Josh Lakin, his knee is hurt, so he's not running. My other buddy hurt his ankle, and so he's having surgeries, and so we haven't trained for anything in like a year. So all of my runs are like easy peasy.
You'll be pushing.
Yeah, if my heart rate gets too high, I'm like, nope, we're gonna slow this on down. So I don't think I could run fast if I wanted to.
My story from the beginning.
Probably could have used a nurse yesterday.
I can finish this year running the whole way.
Well,
I think it's going to
here's
be
my
a lot of
doctors.
fun.
One's 7 years old and one's 5.
There's so much work to do. And last year, for some reason, the work part of
They
it was
had me on the operating
fun.
table.
I don't know, maybe it's
Those
because
are
it's the
foot
first
covers
time.
that they
and
put
you're
on
like,
their head.
oh, wow, we're really doing this. This year it's been like,
And they see the Band-Aids.
okay, I got to email all
He's
the
giving me a
sponsors.
shot. You see the
I've got to
little plastic
email
bowl
the city
that
to
they put
run our permit, and it's been more
Good at improvising.
labor.
Oh,
But
they love it.
this last week, I'm hoping I get to enjoy just the fruit of
Well,
it.
And then
'Cause
there's the 3-year-old. He got in on it too.
Yesterday, I went and picked up these little coupons from the Be Healthy Cafe. They're one of our sponsors.
From that pretty well.
And
I was diagnosed with bugs
manager
in my
of
belly.
the little cafe there said, well, we're going to have somebody dressed up
After
as a
they did a
giant bee
scan
out
on
there
me.
cheering on the runners.
They did a
I thought, that's awesome.
I found out that I
Like
had
it's
bugs
things
in my
like that that just okay, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be a memory that we're gonna make, and it'll be cool.
Are you and the boys going to run the mile? You and the mile were the last time, didn't you?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably I'll do that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm gonna do the 5K because I just want to be around and high five people.
Gotcha. It's Bible. It's not even human. Okay. Well,
Go ahead and get started.
yeah. Who is the first?
I'll do the introductions.
You want to do that?
Yeah. I'll get up here. Bob, why don't you go first? I mean, you can go ahead and introduce the evening. I mean, I just,
All right, that sounds good. I can
yeah,
exactly how you want it done.
yeah.
Well, good evening, friends. It is time to begin. I am glad that you're here, and I'm very grateful for Lana and Jody and Brian for their leadership and all their hard work in putting this evening together. I'm glad that you've chosen to be here, and I'm trusting that God will use this time to equip us and encourage us as we go through the holidays together, however we do that. But let me begin with a word of prayer, and then I will turn it over to Lana. Lord, I thank you for friends who help us by using their experience, their education, and their compassion to help us navigate times that can be tender and challenging. Use this evening, Father, that we might find a source of strength here, an avenue for healing and for hope, and perhaps a safe place and people with whom we can have conversations when those conversations are needed over things that matter to us deeply. Guide this conversation tonight, and we thank you in advance for your presence with us. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
We thank you all for being here tonight. This evening grew out of a conversation that Brian and Jody and I had about the need in our congregation for dealing with grief. And we know that all of us have grief almost continually. It's just a part of our life. So, our lives. So, we started with some thoughts by Doug Manning. Don't know how many of you know of Doug, but he is an Oklahoma City person who has written a lot and has a booklet out on thoughts for the holidays for people who are grieving. And so we started there and decided that perhaps before the holidays got started, it would be good to have a discussion about how we deal with grief in the holidays. So we started. And to introduce us and to get going, each one of us will tell you our own experience with grief at some point in our lives. Mine happens to be with my husband. I was married really pretty young, but married a soldier out of Fort Sill. I lived in Lawton. And my parents actually met my husband first and kind of did an arranged marriage, I always called it. But he was a helicopter pilot during the Vietnam War. And so after we'd been married about 6 months, the MPs came to my home and told me that his helicopter had crashed and burned. That was on January 2nd of 1969. And at that time, I had a 14-month-old boy. And Dean, my husband, had been home on emergency leave when his sister died. So during that time, I had gotten pregnant. So when he died, I was pregnant with our daughter. And she was born about 8 months later. So I was 21 and had 2 babies and was a widow. So fortunately, I had wonderful parents who were very supportive and helped me through that time. But that was the beginning of my experience with grief. Of course, since then, have had friends and family who have died. My parents being the closest, those parents that helped me through that time were very dear to my heart. And in 2000 and 2002, they died. And so it was kind of like grief revisited when I lost them. But tonight, as we talk, we will speak not only from experiences we've had with other folks, but also our own experience with grief. So as we start, we want to tell you about those. You have the format there. We're going to basically, for each of the topics, Jody will start with a short presentation. Brian will handle the microphone and among you, and I will handle this microphone. So that's the way we will proceed, but I'll let Brian come now and introduce himself.
I think I know everybody. I'm Brian, and I'm the runner tonight. I've been training all afternoon with the microphone. So my experience with grief obviously is informed by being at the hospital and working with families. But personally, I think many of you know my story, but basically, when I was in high school, I was 15 when my mom found out that she was diagnosed with cancer, and by the time they found it, it had already kind of spread everywhere. And they said, we're going to try all the treatments, we're going to do all the things, but it was kind of a really just grim prognosis from the start. And so we just we prepared for that, but at that time, like, I had no frame of reference, and so I was as hopeful, and my faith was so strong, I just knew she was going to be healed. And so for the next 6-7 months, I was praying hard and just continued to kind of see her decline. And then we had the holidays together, Christmas, and then she passed away just January 8th, 2001. And so that was kind of my entry into grief. In the one sense, we saw it coming, we prepared, I mean, if you can. I mean, I think some of the misnomers around grief are that we can, if we grieve before, that we won't grieve after, but that's not true, right? And so, anyway, in high school, I'm this kid that is trying to figure out, who I am still, just kind of my identity, without my mom. So that still is hard. And so that kind of framed, I think of like my personal history is kind of like, like we look at world history and we have like, when Jesus was born and then when Jesus died and like BC and AD. I feel like in my own history it's like before mom, after mom, And so that was like and it kind of was a watershed. Just life looked differently. I just looked at everything different. And so then, and that kind of informed my trajectory in life. So my faith was so important. I wanted to minister to people, and I wanted to, help other people that were hurting. So that propelled me really into ministry. And so I went to college. I served in a church after that. Then I went to seminary. And that experience with my mom and really kind of pushed me through ministry. And then many of you know, in November 2019, my dad was running around Lake Overholser, and just early in the morning, running with a group of friends, but as he liked to do, he did things his own way, and kind of went off on his own. And he was running down the road, and someone hit him, and he passed away. And so that was a much different kind of grief, where it was totally unexpected, totally unprepared. Did not see that coming because he was healthy and happy and all that. And so, anyway, that's been a totally different kind of grief. But I will just say one thing I can also compare those two is before I didn't have CPE, which was our chaplain training, and so I didn't know how to express myself and what to do with my emotions. And so then after, when my dad passed away, I knew all that stuff. So I was going to be just going to go through it right. But as grief is, there's no right or wrong way. It helps to express your emotions, but sorry to use this, but it still sucks. Like it still stinks. But anyway, that's kind of my story. I don't know if there's anything else, but that's me.
My first experience with grief in my immediate family was when my dad died of cancer 31 years ago. And kind of like Brian's mom, when he was diagnosed, it had already metastasized, and there was just really not any kind of curative treatment that was available. And he lived with his cancer for 15 months before he died, and walking with Dad and with Mom through that, well, that's just hard. I've learned, there's no easy way to lose someone you love. There are easier ways to die, but there's no easy way to lose someone you love, whether it's a sudden event or or you see it coming, whatever else. It really, it matters, but it doesn't matter. They're still gone. My wife's folks and my mom were both up in years when they died, and watching that aging process and watching this kind of slow deterioration, this growing incapacity, and seeing them get weaker and weaker over time, still compensating. Some had, my mom had memory loss, Ellen's mom had memory loss, Jim was still as alert as he could be. My mother spent the last couple of years in a nursing home, and we didn't know if she understood us or not. And so we had decisions made. Fortunately, she had an advance directive, a living will, giving instructions about what kind of care she wanted to receive toward the end of her life. And she did not want to be kept alive with artificial nutrition and hydration and CPR and all of those kinds of things. And so when she just stopped eating, we knew that she would die in a matter of a few days, and that's what happened. And we were able to be with her. We were able to be with Ellen's parents when they died. But like I said, there's no easy way to lose someone you love. My brother, Stan, was diagnosed with multiple myeloma when he was 60. And he lived with that for 8 years. And we were still hopeful along the way. There were still treatments to be done, and he lived with it, and he would kind of go in and out of remission, and he had good days, and he had difficult times too. But you know, it's when you lose a sibling, it's interesting. Someone pointed out that our siblings are the longest relationships we have in our lives. And you think about it, well, you know, our parents usually precede us in death. You know, our children outlive us, and they come along after we're. But our siblings, I mean, I remember Stan when I was just this little kid. He's 18 months older than I am, and I've known him all of my life. We shared childhood together. We shared adulthood together, all of our lives. And you know, I have 3 brothers, and we're very close friends. And so, you know, the loss of this brother in May of 2018. You know, every loss feels different. Every relationship is different. And so every death feels different. And yet there's something about grief that I think connects to grief, in that we have this feeling. We all know that feeling, that emptiness, and I think there's a reason why they call it heartbreak. We physically feel it in our chest. There's an ache there, and there's an emptiness there, and there's almost a physical pain that we feel along with the emotional pain, and we're reminded of that every time there's another death of someone we know and love and care about, even if they're not related to us, a member of the church or some other friend or whatever else. It reminds us of when we felt that before. And one of the things that tells us is that these feelings don't go away. And they're not something that we need to get over. It's not something for which we need to be cured. We don't get healed of grief. I've learned that the stuff of grief is love. If we didn't love, it wouldn't hurt. And we don't quit loving people when they die. We love them as long as we live. We will miss them as long as we live. How that grief feels will change from time to time. But even after 30 years, there are times when I think of my dad and I just wish so much that I could see him. I had an uncle, my dad's brother, who was killed in World War II. I never got to meet him. I heard stories about him. Last spring, we were in England. He was stationed with he enlisted in the Army Air Corps. He was assigned to the RAF and flew out of several airfields. They weren't even air bases, just airfields, landing strips in England. One was in a little place called Membury. That is one of the few places where there's still a landing strip, and last May, we found that landing strip, and there is just a little tiny monument, a little propeller there that talks about the people who served there at Membury Air Base. And I stood there next to that after we'd spent 2 hours driving around looking for it, and I cried, grieving for an uncle that I never knew. And again, that's because we love these people. And we miss them, and that's painful, but it's also good. I mean, what's worse than having people in our lives disappear and not care? To not feel any hurt about it. The holidays can sometimes be especially difficult as we're living with our grief. And that's why we wanted to do this thing tonight. We made a little handout here, Grieving in the Holidays. And this is not complicated stuff. They're just some ideas, some things to think of, some things to just kind of put into words. Maybe you already know these things and they won't necessarily be aha or oh, I didn't. But sometimes putting things into words helps to galvanize them. And instead of being reactive to things, we can be intentional about them. We can begin to think about it and be proactive rather than just having it catch us off guard. And so, the first thing about the grieving in the holidays is that holidays are emotional times anyway, and especially those holidays where the family gathers and you think back to, Christmases when we were little kids with our siblings and our aunts and uncles and cousins and all of those folks, and now we're at that place where we I'm the old guy, but we just have these rich memories of all of these holidays through the years, and now there are people who have always been part of those memories who are not there now. But holidays are by definition times of memory, of remembering. I think of in Exodus 12, even before they have left Egypt, God instructs Moses, we're going to have this thing called Passover. And what you're going to do is you're going to prepare some food, and you're going to burn bitter herbs and a lamb, and you're going to eat it standing up with the staff in your hand. And when your kids ask you, what is this all about? Then you tell them it's about how God led you out of Egypt and what God did. And so this holiday, this Passover, is completely designed around remembering what God did. And so one of the things that happens when we have holidays is we have memories. And we're going to remember the event. We're going to remember the holiday. We're also going to remember the people that we shared them with. We're going to remember our loved ones who have died. And it's not just death. There may be divorce. There may be people who are absent for one reason or another. When people who used to be there with us can no longer be there with us, we miss them. And we're going to remember them. And so I think the important thing is there's a temptation to try to avoid grief by trying to avoid the memories. And that just doesn't work. In every grief group I've ever done, I've found people who it seems like we're spending a lot of energy trying not to feel what we feel. And sometimes trying to avoid the obvious takes a lot more energy and a lot more work than just facing it and dealing with it, especially when everybody else is doing it too. And so the challenge during the holidays is how do you want to acknowledge your memories and your sadness and your grief in times that are designed for joy and celebration? It's a contradiction. we're singing Joy to the World with tears running down our cheeks because people that we love the most are not with us. And so you may want to set aside some time for yourself and perhaps others to talk about your loved one and the grief you feel. You might want to tell stories, look at pictures, light a candle, go for a walk. It might take 2 hours or 10 minutes, but the point is to intentionally include the memories rather than trying to ignore them. And we have some things, we've talked about, and there may be some things that you have done where you've experienced the loss of loved ones. I know when my brother died, the first Christmas we were able to be back together again, we just talked about Stan and how much we missed him. And went ahead and did some of the things we normally do, but we just recognized, gosh, I wish Stan were here. I wish Stan were here.
Memories of how we spent the holidays, but it's memories of those people at that time. And I think for people who died close to the holidays, it's that memory. I was just reminded, Kristen and I had a very dear friend who just died a week ago yesterday. And Kristen officiated at her funeral in Texas this week. And I have thought about Karen. Her name was Karen. I've thought about her every day this week. There are memories that were just there. They were just very alive. So it wasn't just the memories of the holidays, but it was memories of her. So Brian, you want to get we'll circulate now.
Yeah.
So we want to pose that question to you to be.
Hello. Debbie does.
I just will tell you a little bit about a memory that I use at the holidays, because my mom actually passed away on Christmas Day, which made it pretty tough for a little while. But she always loved Christmas, so of course one of our things was to say, she got to be with Jesus on Christmas Day. But some of the decorating things she did at Christmas time, she was always very creative. I'm not near as creative as she is, but I try to make the decoration thing a big thing, and it's just memory from my mom. So.
Yeah. Neat.
Who else wants to share?
It's really hard. It's just yesterday, I was driving in my car back to my house and thought, oh, Clay's not here to do the decorations for Christmas. He did the outside stuff. We went and got a tree, and I thought, I have to do this by myself. And I don't. I have my daughter, Lynn, but still, I told her today, I said, we're going to have to go to the shed and see if we can figure out what's what, because that's something that Clay did. So I know I want to be intentional about remembering him. I think I do that in choir, and I'm not going to quit, because his memory is still real, and I still think of him being there. And my choir is so gracious and loving that they try to make up for him, I think, sometimes, and be ornery, and that's good. I need that. But yeah, he was ornery. Yes, he was. So I have been thinking about that, and like, how am I going to deal with that? What's that going to look like? It's going to be different.
I'd like to give, I think we can all learn from a bad example too. This happened in my family. My wife's granddad had the audacity to die in the fall. So we show up for the big Thanksgiving day. And Grandpa Griffin always sat at the same place at the table. Before we went to the table, my wife's mother, who was his daughter, got me off to the side and said, "David, would you sit in Grandpa's place today?" I sat in Grandpa's place, but we never mentioned Grandpa. And his wife was there. So on the way home, being the outlaw, I asked my wife, I said, "Can I bring him up at Christmas?" And we did. And it worked. And one other thing, I didn't do this. I read about it, heard about it, something. Making something positive. There's a family that Grandpa died. Grandpa always ate out of a special platter. He didn't want to get seconds. He got the platter big enough to put everything on. Well, he dies. So what did they do? They put names in a hat and drew out, and whoever won got to eat out of Grandpa's platter.
I love that.
Pretty neat.
Well, this is another bad example. When my first husband died, I can't believe that after all these years I'm going to be teary-voiced. But anyway, what we couldn't do is talk about him. I was in my 40s, and my kids were like second grade and middle school. And the thing was, I couldn't talk about him without crying. And so that made them uncomfortable, so we just didn't talk about him. And so that's the, avoiding the memories. But the problem is they were young, and so especially the second grader, he may not even have a lot of memories about my husband because we didn't continue to talk about him. And so I really didn't even think I was coming to this meeting except just as kind of a body. But anyway, something I could do this holiday when I get together with my son and daughter from that marriage is I could bring the subject up if I can talk about it now even, and talk about it for even after this many years.
And the thing about that is it's okay to cry when you talk
Well,
about people.
I know it is, but
You were talking about grief in connection with love. I just read the other day a quote from Queen Elizabeth, one of my favorite people, who said, "Grief is the price we pay for love." And so I think when we grieve, it shows, not only reminds us, but others of how much we love that person. And so that's okay. That's okay. Well, we're going to transition talking about traditions, which go right along with memories. So Chody's going to talk to us a little bit about get us started on that discussion.
All right. Well, I mentioned, Passover, and there are traditions that were set down. Moses writes them all down and instructs the people to do this and this and this and this. And these traditions were to be carriers of the meaning of the holiday. It's a time of remembrance of God delivering the people of Israel out of slavery into Egypt and that whole story that you know. But they're the carriers of the message and the meanings of the holidays. And I'll just read this. They're the customs and practices we follow every year to acknowledge what these days mean to us. Every sight and sound, every taste and aroma, every decoration, every symbol touches something deep within us that again reminds us of holidays and our loved ones. And part of what makes holiday traditions special is that we share them with loved ones, and part of what makes them painful is when we can't. And so we miss them. But one of the things that happens around the holidays is you think of Christmas. Christmas has not always been celebrated the way we celebrate it in America. Some say that Charles Dickens invented Christmas as we celebrate it now. It starts out as the Christ Mass. I think, from what I understand, it was just a day in which they celebrated, this is the day Jesus was born, so we're going to celebrate that with a special Mass, and then you go on, a religious service. all of the other stuff that grows up around it. You know, somehow we got St. Nicholas, and then they became Santa Claus, and we get elves, and we get reindeer, and we get all kinds of livestock. We have the Christmas story, and it's brought in with all this other stuff, and we have presents. I guess that came from the Magi. We have Christmas trees. We have lights and decorations. We have all kinds of stuff that has grown up around Christmas, and we like that, I guess, or we don't, but we do it. And there's all this stuff that goes around, all of these traditions and customs that have accumulated around the birth of Christ. And you know, the question is, what if all of those things went away? And we just celebrated the birth of Christ. Would that make celebrating the birth of Christ less special, less holy? And part of what happens is these traditions, these customs, they can be a lot of fun. They can also be very time-consuming, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, and Cheryl, you were mentioning the decorations. You know, I think that part of the thing is sometimes we have people who have certain roles in putting the holidays together, especially if you're gathering. Well, Ellen had an aunt who always made this Jell-O salad thing with pecans in it and a cranberry salad. And Ellen has become the one who does that now with Chesley's recipe. And these traditions go on, and everybody remembers, and it's a good thing. But, you know, it may be that this year you don't necessarily have the energy or the desire to do it quite the same way you always have in the past. And I think the whole point is that it's important to recognize that the traditions are the carriers of the holiday, of the meanings. They are not the holiday. And that these traditions are to perhaps serve us, but not to enslave us. And if the traditions and the expectations of the holidays are more than you can do this year, it's okay to modify them. It's okay to do them differently. It's okay to do without some of them. You know, you can have Christmas without a tree. It's possible. You can have Christmas without spending a whole lot of money on gifts and things. There are ways of doing the holidays differently that are still important and still meaningful and still good. And, you know, Lena's going to tell you a little bit about celebrating the holidays differently.
Well, mine comes from my story. I'll start this discussion group off with my story, with a piece of my story. When my kids were like probably about 3 and 4, 3 and 5, something like that, I decided I didn't want to spend the holidays with my parents. Now, I mean, that was awful, with a capital A. You know, we had our traditions, and I had always been with my mother and dad and my sister at Christmas, and then sometimes we went to Kansas City to my maternal grandmother's, and we drove around the plaza and looked at the red lights, and, you know, we just had our traditions. So when I went to Mother and said, you know, this Christmas I'm going to go to Louisiana and see my friends Tom and Liz and spend Christmas with them, I thought maybe she's going to stroke out. I just didn't know what she would say, but I think they were so afraid of anything I said those days that they were like, well, okay. So I called my friends in Louisiana and said, can I come to your house for Christmas? And they said, oh, please do. So I'll never forget spending that Christmas with my friends Tom and Liz. And I packed, fortunately the kids were young enough, I could pack the Barbie doll up in the suitcase and take those things that Santa was going to bring and take them with me. And we spent Christmas Day in Bogalusa, Louisiana. It's the only time I ever did that. I never needed to do it again. I think it was just that time that for whatever reason, I needed the kids and I to go to my friends Tom and Liz and spend Christmas Day with them. So we did. So that may present some other kind of grief if you decide to change the tradition. But it's okay. As Jody said, it's okay to make the tradition what it is you need. Ideas or questions you have about your traditions, and how would you like to spend your traditions this year?
Well, let me add one thing. Sometimes you may get pushback from others in the family because part of this grief experience is everybody in your family has lost someone they love. Your relationship to them may be different. You know, I lost a brother, others lost their father, others lost, you know, my sister-in-law lost her husband, you know, others lost an uncle. And so everybody's relationship is different, and so, and everybody grieves differently. Like I said, I have 3 brothers, and we each had our own relationship with Stan, and I don't grieve the same way that Jeff and Ken grieve, and so even though we're brothers, our loss doesn't feel the same way. But all that's to say that you may not be in the same place in your grief that others in your family are in theirs. And what you need may not be the same as what they need. And it's okay to negotiate that. One of the things we mentioned on this, and we won't belabor it, but you know, plan to plan and to have conversations ahead of time. And it may be that, you know, some of these traditions are very important to somebody else in the family. Maybe you used to be the one or maybe you're the one who normally makes the big meal. Well, maybe if it's that important to somebody else in the family, well, how about we potluck that? How about if you take care of this then? How about if you take care of that? That's, you know, that's okay if you want to do that. That's fine. I'm going to let you guys take charge of that this year, but you don't have to be manipulated or guilted into doing things that magnify or exacerbate your grief. You don't need to add guilt to grief. This is hard enough. You don't need to add that complication. Give other people permission to grieve as they need to grieve, but ask for permission to grieve the way you need to grieve. And hold on to those things you want to hold on to, but also give yourself permission to let go of those things that you need to let go of. So you might think about, you know, some things maybe you've done in the past to alter how you've celebrated holidays, or you may just ask for suggestions or whatever. Do what you want with this.
And do you have traditions that you want to think about doing differently? Or maybe something that's near and dear to your heart that you wouldn't change because of that person?
I can give you an example, kind of like David, of how maybe not to do it, or I learned that tradition wasn't going to work. I remember after my year of CPE, where I learned all the tools of the trade, and you know, in CPE we talk about expressing ourselves and our emotions. So I, you know, coordinated with my dad and my sister. I was like, we need to get together and remember Mom on the day she passed away, which was right after Christmas. This is what we have to do. This is the right way to do it. And so they're like, okay, Brian, you know, so we all got together and we all went to Charleston's, and I was just so energized initially because I'm like, this is it. You know, we're doing this thing, and then it just wasn't what I expected it to be. It was kind of just like, oh, we were there, but I realized they were in a different spot in their grief, and they didn't really get a lot out of it. And so that taught me that sometimes you try new things and they take off and they stick, and other times you try new things and then you know, I'm not going to do that one again. So there's permission to try new stuff and see if it works. And but anybody else got a thought or a memory?
We'll talk about that a little. Yeah.
Okay, later. I'll say that for you.
This is kind of stealing from where we're going to be talking about holiday stress later, but one of the things we did is we, you know, the stress of buying gifts and all of that, the expense of it and the time that it takes and all of that, and with Ellen's family after her folks died, we, I'm sorry? It was after Ellen's dad died. Instead of trying to buy gifts for everybody in the extended family and all this kind of stuff, we said we're going to do all of our shopping for each other at Dollar Tree. And so, 14 bucks. You could spend $1 for each person. Everybody got to spend $1 on everybody else in the family. And that's not expensive. And part of what that does is this, it takes all the pressure out of gift giving. What if they give me something that's better than what I gave them? What if I give them something and they don't really like it? Or they already have it, it's the wrong size, or it's da-da-da. The anxiety around gift giving and all this kind of stuff. You're not going to get burned for $1. Expectations are not going to be that high or that low. I mean, it's like, okay, he gave me a balloon racer and all I gave him was a whistle. I mean, who cares? But we had so much fun. And, Ellen, you want to tell about it? Yeah. Okay. This is, instead of her, I feel like a ventriloquist dummy sometimes.
One of the rules that we set was spend $1. It's not. I don't know. How do I know? Spend $1, no more than $1, but be thoughtful about it. So that made it a little bit hard going to Dollar Tree and finding something that, you thought everybody would like. And I will say everybody did a great job with it. And my son-in-law won because he bought all of us balloon racers. And then we had heats. And the winners of each heat would race each other. And we ended up with an ultimate winner. And the prize was $1 pasted on a piece of paper that said Dollar Tree gift certificate, But the point was, this was the first Christmas after Daddy died. My mother was still living, and we had always gone to their house for Christmas. So instead, we came to our house, and we played all day long. And we talked about Daddy, but we weren't sad about it. It was just, it was a different kind of Christmas, and I think that's what made and that's the last time we did it. It was fun that Christmas. It wouldn't be fun for another Christmas. So.
Thank you. So that's one idea of just how to deal with some of that. Other ideas?
One tradition that has been fun that we've got to continue. We never did this growing up, but since my family got into running, apparently that's our thing now. Every Thanksgiving we do the turkey tracks, which is just a race downtown. And before, my kids were too young to run, but now they will sign up for the 1 mile or the 5K, and it's so expensive. It's like $35 a pop. But that's one thing that we continue on. The other thing that's really funny, from years ago, we always did the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation movie. And we always joked there was the TV version, and then there was the non-TV version. The TV version had the bad words blipped out. So we'd always watch that. And that's something even my kids like to watch with me. They don't last the whole movie. They usually watch like 20 minutes, and I sit there and watch the rest of it. But it's been fun that they are able to get on board with those things that mean a lot to me. So.
It's Oklahoma, so you have the weather map in the corner. And then later I was able to find a DVD of each of them, and so my grandkids, is it time? Is it time? Can we watch it yet?
Yeah.
But we watch it after Thanksgiving.
I love how back in the day when you recorded everything on the VHS cassette, and then you accidentally recorded something over it. And so there's like 20 minutes of like Star Search, with Ed McMahon, and then your show.
Who else? Any ideas or memories or how you've dealt with things in the past?
So my family that's my side. When we get together at my mom's, it's usually on the 23rd, and we started doing Dirty Santa for adults, several years ago, and which turned out to be a pretty good thing for a while. And I keep thinking, well, maybe it's time for us to change that, because some of my nieces, my two nieces, both have kids that are older now, and as well as younger ones. And the older ones now participate as adults, and we just get the young ones something. But my point to this is, maybe you just help me, give me some ideas. And I haven't talked to my family about this yet, but Clay always had the most unique gift because he created it. So that means he painted it, he built it. That's just what everybody just looked, with like, oh man, I hope I get what Clay did. So how do you deal with that? Because that's not going to be like that this year. Is this year that maybe we just don't do that anymore, and maybe come up with a different thing, kind of like maybe what you did, Ellen?
Okay, one of the other things we did is we needed to change our traditions around Jody's family. And we've done two things that we enjoyed a lot. One was we're all readers, all 26 of us, or however many there are. And we would bring a book that had meant something to us and do a Dirty Santa that way. And then it deteriorated to, oh, here, let me just take a picture of the cover. By the third year, nobody was trading anymore. They'd just take a picture of the cover so they could get it. But the other thing we did was to do a family trivia game. And this might not be good for new grief, but what we did is each family, each family, wrote 10 trivia questions about the family. And they could be any time from ancestors through whenever. And we played this, and this became a way to tell the stories. You ask a question about something, and instead of doing a gift exchange, we were exchanging stories, family stories with each other.
That's a very creative family.
Well, yeah, of course we do. But that's just two things that we've done to change things.
I will say the family trivia was a big hit. We didn't get through all the questions, and it was, telling the stories to the children and reminiscing for the adults. But we would ask, like, who was born in Petrovka, Ukraine? It was my grandfather, C.J. And now I have a great nephew who was just named C.J. but or whose initials are C.J. There was also who pushed my brother out of a pickup truck, but we won't go into that one. But it was just a way of sharing stories, and we did not get through the questions, and the next year we just pulled them out again and read through some more.
Yeah, Cheryl, I was thinking of a couple of things. One of the things that I thought was it would be changing it up with a different twist, but maybe a person would bring a gift that Clay had given in the past, and that would be the spotlight for the gift-giving time or something like that. Or another idea is everybody brings something Clay had given in the past, and then that would kind of combine those memories along with a new tradition. But I would think, I enjoyed hearing about that at the funeral. Somebody was talking about about that experience, and I just remember that with a chuckle. That was a piece of happiness. So it seems like you might be able to do something around that, at least this first year. You might not want to continue that for a long time, but.
Maybe if they just all brought them and passed around and talked about them, that would be enough. Somebody might say, well, I don't want to give mine away.
But a way of just acknowledging that and celebrating it and missing him in the midst of it, but a way of also but that's a whole lot of what this is about. And that's really the next step is that the emotions are going to be there, the feelings are going to be there, and so acknowledge them and just incorporate them into what you're doing. My son had a book called "There's No Such Things as Dragons," and this is one of those little golden books. And I remember reading it to him when he was a preschooler. And it's about this little boy who wakes up one morning and there's a dragon at the foot of his bed. It's about the size of a kitten. And well, how cool is that? And so he goes running down the stairs and, hey, look, I've got a dragon. It's a dragon. And his mom said, well, there are no such things as dragons. And he said, well, yeah, there are. It's right. And she just ignored it. And so it's up on the kitchen table eating everybody's breakfast. And it's about the size of a dog now. But there are no such things as dragons. And the little boy and his dad go off to school and to work, whatever else. And now this thing's about the size of a cow. And then it gets bigger and bigger. And mom is climbing in and out of windows and trying to clean the house. And then a bread truck goes by, and this dragon actually picks the house up. It's on its back now, and he chases the bread truck down the street. And the little boy comes home, and his dad comes home, and they're looking for the house, and they finally locate it. And mom's up in the second-story window, and the little boy says, the dragon carried the house away. And she says, there are no such things as dragons. And he said, well, yeah, there are. Look what he's done. And she goes, well, I guess there are such things as dragons. And it shrunk back down to the size of a kitten. I thought that was about dragons for a long time. But the point is, when we ignore something, it can just get bigger and bigger. And pretty soon it carries the whole house away. But if you acknowledge it, you can begin to address it, you can begin to deal with it, and it stays a manageable size. And so acknowledging the emotions that are there, not ignoring them, not pretending that they're not there. This isn't about getting over grief. It's not about avoiding grief. It's not about avoiding all these feelings and just pretending we're all happy and nobody's going to say anything because everybody else has forgotten this person we love has died and everybody else is happy. Well, we're not going to remind anybody of their grief. They're already carrying this, and it's this close to the surface. And so if everybody just acknowledges it, all of a sudden it becomes something that is shared. And one of the things I've come to believe is that when we share our joy, it's multiplied. And when we share our sorrow, sometimes it just feels like it's not quite as much as it used to be. It's less. Our sorrow is somehow divided or lessened when we share it with people who are willing to share it with us in good ways. And so as a family, as you join together in this time that's already rich with emotion, to acknowledge the grief in the midst of that isn't going to heighten everybody's grief. It's maybe going to heighten the sense of love you feel for each other, because that's a component of grief.
I'm going to pass it up.
Okay, let's get the microphone to you.
You want to go ahead and do stress and then
Sure.
wrap up?
Yeah, we can do that. Oh, that's what you want to say? Okay. As far as who else wants to talk about emotions or around the holidays? Anybody?
One more little idea
Go ahead.
for Cheryl. You might have each person or each year, wherever you're having the family get together, make somebody each year bring their homemade gift to be the table decoration at that place, and then it'd be a different one every year.
You know, I thought too, you could have two teams. You could divide up into two teams. You could have a contest, have a bunch of stuff, and let the two teams make something that would remind them of Clay or something they think he might make, and then give a prize to whichever one is best, better.
He would be all over that.
You would like that?
He was a competitor.
But you know, but that's another way of incorporating and remembering rather than trying to forget and avoid. and it reshapes that. Doug Manning, as we mentioned before, talked about the loss of a grandchild. And that very first Christmas, they lit a candle and talked about this child. And there were some tears and there was some laughter and there was whatever else, but it was there. And now every year since, they continue to light that candle. And now the children are saying, "Can I light the candle this year?" And that has now become part of the tradition, and it's a way of grieving in healthy ways. It's and it's okay to have both the sorrow and the joy, and it's just, again, it's not that sad feelings are going to go away, but we hopefully learn to live with our grief in healthy ways, and again, sharing our grief with the family. And part of what this does also is it teaches our children and teaches our grandchildren, hopefully, how to grieve in healthy ways, that it's okay for them to feel the feelings they feel and to talk about those things and to talk about people they miss out loud, and to not feel like this is something they have to hide and cover up or avoid because it's going to make everybody else unhappy. And for some reason, I seem to be the only one unhappy. Everybody else seems to be okay, except they're not. Okay, a couple of things I just want to add on this is plan to plan, and there's some lists of things in there about just coordinating with family about things, or if there are things that you especially want to do, make time to do that. If there are things that you don't want to do, you can also make plans to avoid that. Choose the activities you want to do, especially if you're just emotionally flat, depressed, whatever else. It's real easy to just get out of any kind of discipline with spending. And so watch the credit cards, watch the spending, those kinds of things, and keep the traditions that are important to you. As far as the stress goes, and we'll go over that quickly. If I can find the right page. I've got it in here. I'm getting real anxious about this, though. That's a joke. Wasn't a very good one, but it was. Hardly recognizable as such. Holiday stress. Okay. Even the best of times, sometimes the holidays can be stressful. And especially in these times, we sometimes we just feel these expectations to make the holidays just Disney World. And it's got to be this, every bite has to be perfect, all the decorations have to be this, everything, and everybody's going to be happy, and everybody's going to be it's all going to come out, no conflict, it's all going to come out perfectly, nothing's going to get burned, and it's all going to come out under budget, and that's probably not going to happen because it never has before. But we set such high expectations sometimes that it's impossible to live up to it. And so I think the first thing to do, again, is be intentional. Think about the things that might make these days stressful and difficult for you. Are you anticipating things? Maybe it's the meal preparation, maybe it's the gift buying, maybe it's the time, maybe it's the travel, maybe it's one thing or another. Think about what it is that you're anxious about for the holidays. And think about, okay, how much of this do I need to hang on to? How much of this can I let go of? How can I do this differently? How much of this can I perhaps share with others and let them carry some of the load of that? Or like we mentioned, the gift giving, buying the presents, we did all kinds of stuff with that in my family to change how that is, and we have a ball. One of the things about Thanksgiving, people tend to like Thanksgiving better than Christmas. Have you noticed that, the celebration? What do you do on Thanksgiving? You get together, you have a meal, you what? Not the women, okay. Well, the guys, no. But you get together, you have a nice meal, and you enjoy each other. You take a nap on the couch, and you watch the ball game, and you just, the cousins play together, and you do this kind of stuff. Christmas is a whole lot more complicated. And so maybe you need to uncomplicate Christmas. Maybe you need to uncomplicate it in some way or another. And so think about what's stressful for you and let go of what you want to let go of. But I think the other important thing about that is there have been times when we've gone through the holidays and we were so busy doing all of this stuff that we missed out on the stuff that we really wanted to do. You know, I really wanted to go to that thing at the church. I really wanted to go to that concert. I really wanted to go to this. I wanted to do that. And we were so busy baking this or doing something else that we didn't get to do what we wanted to do because we were busy doing stuff we really didn't care about. And so identify what you really want and claim that time. And if you can't do everything, let go of the stuff you don't want to do and hang on to the stuff that you do want to do. Hang on to the things you value. Hang on to the stuff that you want. And again, if finances, whatever else, think of a different way to exchange gifts. Think of a different way to do all that. Like I said, we ended up giving books, and now we just tell stories. Now we just get together. We don't worry about any kind of gift exchange at all with my extended family. We do with the children, but set reasonable expectations, and that's another thing. Set reasonable expectations about gift and food and family instead of adding, giving yourself added pressure. A lot of the pressure we feel is self-induced. It's like, if I don't do this, then people are going to be disappointed. The house isn't decorated as much as it used to be. Or, it looks like I'm not doing this or that or whatever else. Who cares? Who cares? Some of this you can look back at and say, what difference does it make? And, but part of what this is all about is all of these customs and traditions can be fun and meaningful and wonderful in a lot of different ways, and then sometimes they can enslave us. And so a lot of this conversation is about giving yourself permission to do what is good for you, to celebrate the holidays in a healthy and a happy and meaningful way for you.
I had a couple other thoughts. One of the things that I did just last week was I get a lot of catalogs, and they have these charades for Thanksgiving, so I bought a box of them. Now, I don't know how that's going to go. I'll let you know next year. It may be a total flop. But they also have one for Christmas, charades. And so, there comes kind of a time in the afternoon, especially when the kids are out playing football in the lawn, that we adults are kind of sitting around, and I thought, well, now this would liven up the party. So we'll try charades and see how that goes. Another thing that I thought of, Jody, when you were talking is I have a friend who, with her and her husband, they do not buy gifts for their kids. They take them on a trip. So they've substituted that travel, and they end up spending about the same money, but the kids don't have to spend a lot of money. I mean, they have to spend some. But that also you can regulate by where you go and how long you stay and how you stay and all of that. But it reminded me of a couple of Christmases when my parents and I went to Old Mexico on Christmas, and those were great memories as well. So travel might be another tradition to change. So it's time for wrap up.
All right. And that's good. My daughter has mentioned the fact that, her kids have more stuff than they need. And she said she would rather them have experiences. And so the idea of taking kids to a museum, taking them to a concert, taking them skating, taking them someplace and doing something with them may be a better gift of time and relationship and whatever else rather than another toy to unwrap. And I will say this, when we did the Dollar Tree thing, the little ones enjoyed 12 little $1 gifts as much as they did some of the other stuff, and some of them had just as much play value. Okay, what else about holiday stressors? Anybody have anything they'd like to?
You know, one thing I would add to that, I took a course not too long ago on happiness, what creates happiness. It was a 6-hour course. It's kind of interesting to talk about happiness for 6 hours. But anyway, one of the things that they said is that research, and I can't quote the research to you, but that research has shown that experiences make people much happier than gifts, than things you buy for them. So that, I mean, I've thought a lot about that too in terms of my kids, grandkids, the way we interact with them. Our experience, if experiences make them happier, then what kind of experiences can we create rather than just always buying something?
And that might be like making the gifts and doing that kind of stuff, having an activity with the family. Okay, what else?
Just a thought that kind of connects with that. You know, we started tonight with talking about memories, the significance of memories, unpacking those, telling those. One of the dynamics that I struggle with is through time, the further I go along, the further I am from that memory. So it becomes harder to remember that. And then like that hit me one day and I was like, that is really depressing. But one thing is that you can create new memories. You can create new experiences. And so, and you can create new experiences tied to your loved one. And so my other thought connecting that is grieving in the age of social media. A lot of times social media is about happiness and, oh, look, we did this amazing thing as a family. Look, all my kids' clothes match, all this nonsense. And but one thing I tend to do sometimes is I'm kind of maybe too transparent or overshare, I don't know, but I'll share a post about my mom or my dad. And one of the coolest things is when people that knew them comment on that and also share a memory. And so I found out through that process that some of the nurses I work with at the hospital, actually, my mom taught them nursing. And so that was a positive memory that each time I see that nurse now, I think of my mom. And so even though I can't go to the past, I can bring the past to the present maybe. I don't know, but just a thought.
One of the neat things when my mother died and we had her estate sale, my brother was in charge of it and we all worked at it. And you know, you would think seeing people come and get all of her stuff and pay for it and take it away would be horrible. But really it was kind of cool because all these people, it was a small town, all these people would come in and they'd say, oh, I've loved this piece of furniture that she's had for all these years and now I'm going to get to have it in my house, or I just want to get something, you know, buy something that'll help me remember her. And then other people would come in and tell us stories about her and my dad who had died previously. So it really was kind of fun, actually.
I've kind of battled within myself whether I should even mention this or not. But a reality for some folks about the holidays is you are, by tradition or whatever, compelled occasionally to be with people you'd really rather not be with. And that can be, on a good day, that can be an incredible source of stress. But if you're already grieving, you're already feeling bad, anticipating that might be more than you can bear. And so, you know, I wish I had a really good solution, you know, but I do think that that's something to be mindful of, that, or at least acknowledge that sometimes part of the stress of holidays is you got to be with some folks who are tough. And maybe the person who passed away was a buffer, or maybe they were somebody who was so good to be around that it compensated for the challenge of the other person. Or maybe you just decide this year you're going to observe Festivus, and after the holidays you're going to gather with people and air your grievances. But I just think I just thought that might be worth mentioning as a reality.
Yes, I think that's very important.
My reality is that my business brings everything to a culmination in November and December, and it is the most stressful 2 months of the whole year. And then you throw in Thanksgiving, and you throw in Christmas, and you throw in loss, and you throw in blended family, you throw in all of this stuff, and quite frankly, I just kind of want it to get done and be done for another year. You know, that's kind of the attitude, which I'm trying to, each year it's getting better. I'm praying about it more to just enjoy the moments and enjoy the, and we've had a great blended situation. You know, there's a lot of divorced families that face that. You know, we didn't force blending with our kids during the holidays, and it's kind of naturally evolved that they want to be together, and what we had older kids. But it's a very stressful time for some of the people in that situation too. You know, how do you have enough time? My daughter's family, both of her husband, both of his parents are divorced, both of her parents have divorced. They have 4 families to have to navigate and be with. And so our experience has always been, it doesn't have to be Christmas Eve. It doesn't have to be Christmas Day. Whenever we can get together, you know, let's just pick a day and do it. So I'm going to try not to be a Scrooge again this year.
Thank you, Jody. Yes. Brian, Lana, thank you for this.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Just the blended families, and as the kids get older, and marriages, and just all of that, it just the logistics. One of the early stressors for newlyweds is how are you going to negotiate the holidays, and it can be tough, and so again, I think flexibility, like you said. We had a Christmas 1999. Our niece was living in Australia and working for a company that dealt with computers very heavily. And they said, everybody's going to be here during the transition to 2000. Remember Y2K? Okay, we had Christmas on the first weekend in December on Saturday, and it was at Ellen's parents' house, and we did it just the way we had always done it, and we did all the gifts, had the tree, all this kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, we loaded the kids up in the car, and we were driving, you know, a few miles across town to Ellen's parents' house, and we passed a shopping center, and we looked at it and thought, why are all these people shopping on Christmas? It wasn't Christmas for anybody but us. But the point is, it felt just like Christmas because we were doing Christmas on the 6th. And you know, if you just look outside, December 6th really doesn't look a whole lot different than December 25th. It's just a day. And so whenever you can have it, you do it. And having some flexibility. And again, give yourself permission to maybe let go of some of this stuff. If you need to let go of it, it's okay too.
I want to say, you've used the phrase let go of it several times, but I want to be a little bit stronger. I found one year that it was just really excellent to say no. I'm not going to that party this year. I'm not going to that party. There were lots of parties involved in work and school and so forth. And I'm not going to this. I'm just going to have a peaceful, and you know, that wasn't even tied to grief, but how much more do you need peace and quiet and less stress? So, you know, I think you should be strong enough to say no if you need to, not just let it go.
So don't just let it go; throw it out the door. No, but it's not. You know, you don't also have to look at that as a negative. You can look at it as a way of saying, I need to embrace these things that are going to be better for me this year. It's healthier for me to focus on this and this and this, and just say, yeah, just say no. I'm not going to do this year. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do something else. Those things are not important to me, or not as important to me. And so, you know, you have the right to make choices. You have the right to make choices. Anybody else?
One more thing, and then I think our time is about. Okay, okay. Well, well, I'll do this from my chair if that's okay with you all. It reminded me of one of my most memorable Christmases, and I think it was 1999. I'm not sure the year, but when you said that, it rang a bell, because I had back surgery on December the 24th, and it was an open time. Nobody else was having surgery that day, so I got it. So anyway, that was the year of the blizzard, if I've got the right year. And so the hospital went on black, which meant that the staff could not leave on December the 24th. They had to stay. And I was in ICU, and they also didn't have enough nurses to move me out of ICU, so I got to stay in ICU for an extended stay because that's where the nurses were. And that was one of the best Christmases. The staff was so nice. And it was kind of a special time for them. I mean, here they were having to work Christmas Day, but they made that experience a real positive experience for me. And I remember it being, you know, we opened the windows in the ICU and the snow was falling. It was beautiful, but it was in ICU. And my kids, when we get together, they still talk about that Christmas. I don't know everything they did while I was in the hospital, but I know they had a lot of fun at my house while I was in ICU. So it was a memorable time for them too. So, you know, and it reminds me too, there are a lot of other losses, and you all have mentioned some of those besides death. We grieve over a lot of things. We grieve over my dog Roxy loved Christmas, and Roxy will not be with us this year. So, you know, there are a lot of things. Divorce brings up a lot of separations, a lot of goodbyes. So there are other kinds of grief besides just the death. So we hope this has been helpful for you, and thank you for coming. Let us know what you think, first of all, about this. We kind of have this fantasy that maybe we need to have this conversation every year before the holidays. There might be other people who aren't here that would need to talk about this. The other thing is, this is the beginning of a larger program. We've identified, the nurses have identified in the church that we need to have a program for grievers. And so this is the beginning of that, and we will be doing, right now we're planning on maybe a support group in the spring, but we will be formulating a fuller program for dealing with grief. I know a friend of mine whose husband died last year goes to Quail Springs, and they have a Phoebe group for women who are grieving the loss of their spouse, but it's just for women. We decided that there are men who grieve as well. So anyway, if you have ideas or things that you would like for us to do, please let us know, and that will help us form that. So again, we appreciate this. And Pastor, you want to close us?
Perhaps in that same vein, real quickly, we are planning a service of consolation at Christmas as well, on the 4th of December, where we will engage the process of grieving in worship as an expression of worship and lament and comfort and encouragement. So I want you to know about that, and you may want to invite and bring friends to be part of that as well. All right? Thank you very much for your leadership, guys, in putting this together tonight. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for being here. God bless you. Go in peace. Oh, I'm sorry, what's that?